I can see the future. Flashes, visions, gut punches of things not yet happened. I've predicted storms, accidents, heartbreaks, all of it. So tell me why, on the worst morning of my life, I sent my ultrasound to a complete stranger. Two of them, actually. Billionaires. Twins. And the reply that came back? It didn't just chill my blood. It stopped my entire heartbeat. The clinic smelled like antiseptic and bad decisions. I sat in a paper gown that crinkled every time I breathed, holding a black and white photo that had completely obliterated every single plan I'd made for the next 5 years. The image was grainy, blurry, barely the size of a kidney bean, but it was real. He's real. My OB doctor. E. Finch, a kind woman with reading glasses she never actually used for reading, had handed me the ultrasound printout with a warm smile and said, 8 weeks, Elliot. Strong heartbeat. Strong heartbeat. Meanwhile, mine had flatlined entirely. I stared at that tiny blur and thought, okay, I've handled worse, which was technically true. Last March, I'd had a vision of a Category 3 storm 3 days before it hit the Connecticut coast, warned my entire apartment building, saved 2 cats, 1 elderly man named Gerald, and a truly impressive collection of vintage vinyl records. I can handle a baby. I repeated that to myself 4 times on the walk to the parking lot. By the 5th time, I didn't even believe it a little bit. I'm 26. I'm an Omega with a 2nd-floor apartment in Greenwich that smells faintly of old radiator and ambition. I work remotely as a freelance data analyst, which sounds impressive until you realize it mostly means I eat cereal and spreadsheets at 2 in the morning. My car has a dent in the passenger door that I've been meaning to fix for 8 months. I own exactly 1 houseplant, and it is, clinically speaking, dying. I am not ready to be someone's father. But here I am, 8 weeks along, single, and holding photographic evidence that my life has permanently changed direction. The cold November air hit me the second I pushed through the clinic's glass doors. Greenwich in late fall looked like a postcard. Red maples lining the sidewalk, old money architecture stacked clean against a gray sky. Beautiful, indifferent, exactly how I felt. I climbed into my car, turned the heat on full blast, and sat there. The vision came without warning. That's how my precognition works. No invitation, no preparation. 1 second I'm staring at my foggy windshield. The next I'm somewhere else. A flash, a fragment. 2 figures standing in a room made of glass and steel, voices low, faces sharp. I couldn't see their faces clearly, but I felt them. Weight, authority, something coiled and controlled beneath expensive calm. Then it was gone. I blinked, pressed my palm flat against my sternum. Weird. My visions were usually cleaner than that. This one felt like static, like trying to tune into a frequency that wasn't broadcasting yet. I shook it off, opened my phone. I needed to tell someone, not my mother. She'd cry and then start planning a baby shower within the hour. And I wasn't emotionally ready for bunting. Not my best friend Jasper, who was currently backpacking through Oregon and had the cell service of a medieval peasant. I decided I'd text a photo. Just send the ultrasound to myself, get it out of my hands, make it feel less apocalyptic when it existed somewhere beyond this front seat. My hands were shaking. I didn't notice I'd scrolled past my own number until I'd already hit send. The silence that followed lasted exactly 47 seconds. I counted. It's a precognition habit. I time gaps because sometimes the future slides in during the quiet. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Is this meant for us? I stared at it. Us? I typed back slowly. Sorry, wrong number. Please disregard. 3 dots appeared immediately. Disappeared. Appeared again. Unknown number. We can't disregard this. My stomach dropped. Before I could respond, a second message came through. Different contact, same unknown prefix. Unknown number 2. Elliot Voss. We know who you are, and we need to meet. The air in my car went thin. I hadn't given my name. I hadn't said a single identifying word. Just a grainy ultrasound image sent to the wrong number by a man with trembling hands. How do they know my name? My precognition flickered. Another flash. Faster this time, sharper. That same glass and steel room. Two silhouettes. And then one of them turned, and I caught it, just barely. A jaw like architecture, and eyes that looked like they'd already decided something about me. My phone buzzed one final time. Unknown number. The child in that image. We believe he may be ours. Both of ours. Don't run. And Elliot, we'll explain everything. I dropped my phone into the passenger seat, sat completely still. Then out loud to no one, in a parked car in Greenwich, Connecticut, I said, I should have let Gerald drown. The words hung in my car like smoke. My phone sat face up on the passenger seat, screen still glowing, those last words burning right through me. Don't run, Elliot. We'll explain everything. I picked the phone up slowly. The way you pick up a spider you're not sure is dead yet. I read it again. Then again. Then I took a long, measured breath, the kind my therapist calls grounding, and I call trying not to spiral in a parking lot, and I typed back with the calmest thumbs I have ever used in my life. I don't know who you are. I don't know how you know my name. And I am genuinely, spiritually unbothered by whatever you think is happening right now. Have a blessed day. Sent. I felt good about that. Professional, composed, unbothered. My phone rang, not a text, an actual phone call. Full contact display reading, B. Hale. I let it ring 4 times, which is the exact number of rings it takes to feel like you have dignity, then answered. You shouldn't have my number. That was my opener. I thought it was strong. You sent us your ultrasound. The voice on the other end was low, controlled. The kind of voice that had never once in its life been told no and processed it emotionally. I think the number issue is secondary. The number issue is very much primary, I said. Who are you? Beckett Hale. The name landed like a stone into still water. I felt the ripple before I understood why. At the Hale Group? I asked, because even living in my second-floor apartment with a dying plan and emotional damage, I was not completely disconnected from Connecticut's financial ecosystem. Yes, as in the Hale Group that owns half of downtown Greenwich and the other half of the Connecticut shoreline. You're well informed. I'm a data analyst. It's literally my personality. I pressed my free hand flat against the dashboard. Okay, so why does a Hale think my baby has anything to do with him? A pause, clean and deliberate. Because 6 months ago, Beckett said carefully, my brother and I were involved in a private medical arrangement through a fertility clinic in Stamford. There was a reported processing error. We were never given a full explanation. Another pause. The clinic closed 3 weeks later. The inside of my car felt suddenly very small. I thought about what my OB had said last spring when I first came in confused and terrified. The records from your donor screening were partially incomplete, Elliot. There was an administrative issue at the originating facility. She'd said it gently, apologetically, like she was describing a scheduling mistake and not the demolition of my entire understanding of my situation. What was the clinic's name, I asked. My voice came out quieter than I intended. Stamford Fertility and Reproductive Sciences. My stomach dropped clean through the seat. That was my clinic, the one that had closed, the one whose files had been transferred in fragments to 3 different practices across Fairfield County. The one whose administrator had called me in January with so many apologies that I'd stopped counting them after 7. Elliot, his voice shifted, just slightly, a fraction of something underneath the control. Are you still there? I'm here, I said. I'm just mentally redecorating my entire life. Give me a second. He made a sound that was almost a laugh. Almost. I need to meet you, he said, in person. Today, if possible. Today is not possible. Today I found out I'm 8 weeks pregnant. Today is already operating at maximum capacity. Tomorrow then. You move fast for someone who just learned they may have accidentally co-created a human being? I move fast in general. No apology in it, just fact. Barrett will want to be there, my brother. He's been following this situation longer than I have. Something about that made the back of my neck prickle. Following this situation, That's a very clinical way to phrase potential fatherhood. Would you prefer a different phrasing? I'd prefer to wake up and find out this morning was a fever dream. I understand. And he said it like he actually did, which somehow made it worse. But it wasn't. I looked down at the ultrasound photo sitting on my thigh. That tiny blur, that strong heartbeat. My precognition flickered again, sudden and uninvited. Not a full vision, just a fragment. The smell of cedar and something cold, like winter air through an open window. A hand, large and steady, resting against something white. The sound of breathing in a room that had gone completely silent. Then nothing. I pressed 2 fingers to my temple. Helpful, really helpful. Fine, I said. Tomorrow, somewhere public, neutral territory, and I'm bringing coffee because I cannot process billionaire paternity drama without caffeine. Name the place. There's a cafe on Mason Street. Grounds in Comert 9 in the morning. We'll be there. Both of you? Both of us, he confirmed. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Then I said, because I could not physically help myself, just so we're clear, I am not impressed by money. I am not interested in being managed. And if either of you comes in there acting like this is a business acquisition, I will leave and you will spend the rest of your lives wondering about that ultrasound. Are we understood? The pause this time was longer. When Beckett Hale spoke again, and his voice had something new in it, something careful and almost warm. Understood, he said quietly. I hung up, sat there, looked at my dying plant metaphor of a life, and whispered, okay, baby, it's just us against 2 billionaires. We've had worse odds. I had not, in fact, had worse odds, but we were going to figure it out anyway. I told myself that approximately 19 times between the clinic parking lot and my apartment. I told myself that while I microwaved leftover pasta for dinner, because cooking felt like too much ambition for a man whose entire future had just been restructured by a wrong number. I told myself that at 2 in the morning when I was lying flat on my back, staring at the ceiling, one hand resting light against my still flat stomach, and listening to the radiator clank like it was trying to communicate in Morse code. Figure it out. Figure it out. Figure it out. By 8:45 the next morning, standing outside grounds in Commerce on Mason Street with a scarf wrapped twice around my neck and a coffee order already decided, I had almost convinced myself I was calm. Then a black car the length of a city block rolled smoothly to the curb. Not a sedan, not an SUV. Something architectural, something that had never once in its existence encountered a parking ticket and would not know what to do with one. The door opened. The first thing I noticed was the height, then the coat, charcoal gray and perfectly fitted, the kind of coat that did not come off a rack. Then the face. Beckett Hale looked exactly like someone had taken the concept of authority and given it a jawline. He was sharp in the way that old money got sharp after enough generations. Dark hair, cut clean, eyes a particular shade of gray that reminded me of the sky about 20 minutes before a storm decides to commit. He moved like a man who had never once been in a hurry because everything waited for him anyway. He spotted me immediately. I hated that. I had wanted at least 3 seconds to compose myself before being spotted. Elliot Voss, he said. Not a question. Beckett Hale, I said back, matching his energy. You're tall. I want to note for the record that I find that mildly inconvenient. Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. More like the memory of one. The second door opened. Barrett Hale unfolded from the car like a different equation entirely. Where Beckett was sharp, Barrett was still. Quieter in his presence somehow, even though he was just as tall, just as composed. His coat was darker. His eyes were lighter, a strange pale brown that looked almost amber in the gray morning light. He looked at me with a kind of careful attention that made me feel like I was being read in a language I didn't know existed. I did not like it. Barrett, I said preemptively. Yes, he said simply. His voice was lower than Beckett's, unhurried. Great. We all know each other. Let's get inside before I freeze. I turned and walked through the door first because I had decided in bed at 2 in the morning that I would not let either of them lead. Small victory maybe, but I was collecting them. Grounds and company. Ash was warm and slightly overpopulated, with the kind of Greenwich morning crowd that wore yoga clothes and talked loudly about real estate. I had picked it specifically because it was public and slightly chaotic, and absolutely not the kind of place where a power move felt comfortable. We settled into a corner table. I sat across from both of them, wrapped my hands around my coffee cup, and looked at them directly. "Okay," I said. "Talk." Beckett straightened slightly. "We want to explain the situation fully before you make any decisions. I've already made several decisions this morning. I had oatmeal. I wore the scarf. I decided not to panic until I had actual information. You're the actual information portion of my day, so please proceed." Barrett watched me over the rim of his own cup with an expression I could not decode. It wasn't cold exactly. It was more like he was paying very close attention and hadn't decided what to do with what he was finding. Beckett set his cup down. The Stamford Clinic contracted with a private Omegaverse reproductive program. Barrett and I had participated in a donor program 18 months ago. Standard, anonymous, or it was supposed to be. "Supposed to be," I repeated. "When the clinic closed, their records were mishandled. Our donor profiles were transferred incorrectly into a general Omega fertility pool. Profiles that were flagged as closed were accidentally made active again during the data migration." I sat very still. "So when I went in for my procedure," I said slowly, "what I was given was not what was supposed to be available to me." "Correct. And nobody caught it. Not until after the clinic closed and we began our own inquiry." The coffee cup in my hands felt suddenly very heavy. Here was the thing about my precognition. It worked on instinct. It flickered when something mattered, when something was about to shift the architecture of my life in ways I couldn't avoid. It had flickered in that parking lot. It had flickered on the phone with Beckett. And right now, sitting in this warm, noisy cafe with two strangers who shared a face and apparently shared a biological connection to the person growing quietly in my body, it was doing something I had never experienced before. It went completely silent. No flash, no fragment, no whisper of a future event, just stillness. Like whatever came next was so significant that even my own ability couldn't look at it directly. That scared me more than anything Beckett had said. "I need you to understand something," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. "Whatever the paperwork says, whatever the biology turns out to be, I am not a complication in your inquiry. I am a person, and this baby is my baby first." "We understand that," Barrett said. It was the first full sentence he'd spoken since we sat down. Quiet and clean, with nothing underneath it that I could pick apart. "Do you?" I looked at him directly. He met my eyes without hesitation. "Yes." I wanted to dismiss that. File it under things powerful men said before the part where they revealed their actual agenda. But something about the steadiness of it sat uncomfortably in my chest, shuttled like a note played in a key I wasn't expecting. I looked back at Beckett. "So what exactly do you want from this meeting?" He folded his hands on the table. "We want a paternity confirmation, handled privately and with full respect for your autonomy. And after that, whatever involvement you're comfortable with, we'd like to discuss." "Discuss," I said. "As in, you'd like to negotiate access to a child who doesn't exist outside an ultrasound photo yet. As in, we would like to be given the opportunity to be considered," Beckett said carefully. "Nothing more than that right now." I looked at them both. Barrett was still watching me with that quiet, unreadable attention. Beckett looked like he was used to situations resolving in his favor, and was working very hard not to assume this one would. My precognition stayed silent, while my instinct, which was a completely separate and significantly more chaotic system, said, "These two are going to make your life extremely complicated." "Fine," I said. "Paternity test, my doctor, my terms." "Agreed," Beckett said immediately. "And nobody touches my life or my choices until there are actual results." "Agreed." "And you're paying for my coffee." Barrett reached for the check without being asked. I watched him do it and thought, against every reasonable instinct I had, well, that was smooth. I didn't say it out loud, but I thought it very loudly. Then I stood up, pulled my scarf back around my neck with what I considered exceptional dignity, and walked out of Grounds & Co. into the cold November air with my coffee cup, my ultrasound, and a brand new category of problem I had absolutely no framework for. Behind me, I heard two sets of footsteps. Both of them followed me out. Of course they did. Elliot! Beckett's voice carried without effort. We should exchange numbers. Properly this time. I stopped walking, turned around. They were standing side by side on the sidewalk, which should have looked ridiculous given how much combined expensive fabric was involved, but instead looked like a cologne advertisement that a very confused photographer had shot in front of a Connecticut coffee shop. You already have my number, I pointed out. You called it yesterday. Your number came through on the misdirected message. I'd like you to have ours willingly given rather than accidentally received. I stared at him. That was almost poetic. Were you practicing that? Barrett made a sound. Small, quiet, contained. But I caught it. And the very specific sound of someone suppressing a laugh they didn't intend to have. I looked at him sharply. His face was composed. Perfectly, suspiciously composed. Fine. I pulled out my phone. We exchanged numbers the old-fashioned way, which felt bizarre given the circumstances. Like we were colleagues after a networking event, rather than three strangers entangled by a medical error and one extremely consequential ultrasound. I had just locked my screen when a flash hit me. Not gentle, not brief. This one landed like cold water straight to the chest. I saw the cafe window behind me reflected white. I heard something crack, structural and immediate, somewhere above. And I saw Barrett's hand, reaching out, fast and certain, gripping my arm. Then it was gone. I blinked. Beckett was watching me with a slight frown. Oh, are you all right? Fine, I said automatically. I took one small step to the left. 2 seconds later, the wooden planter box mounted above the cafe entrance gave way from its bracket and crashed down exactly where I had been standing. Soil and broken wood scattered across the sidewalk. A woman nearby screamed. The barista inside pressed both hands to the glass. Nobody moved for a full 3 seconds. Then Barrett said very quietly, "You stepped before it fell." "I have good instinct," I said. He looked at the broken planter, then at me. His pale amber eyes had gone very still in a way that felt less like calm and more like thinking happening at a speed I couldn't track. "That wasn't instinct," he said. "You don't know what it was." "No," he agreed, "but I'd like to." Beckett was already on his phone, probably having someone handle the planter situation through whatever network of assistants managed his physical reality. I was still looking at Barrett. He was still looking at me. The moment stretched itself out into something slightly too long to be comfortable and slightly too charged to be ordinary. I broke it first. "Your car is still at the curb." "It is. You should both get in it." "Our office is 12 minutes from here," Beckett said, rejoining the conversation with his phone now lowered. "We have the preliminary paperwork prepared. If you're willing, we could go over it now rather than scheduling another meeting." I looked at the broken planter on the sidewalk, then at my coffee cup, then at the two Hale brothers who were watching me with entirely different expressions, but the same quality of attention. Like two different instruments playing the same note, my precognition was still unusually quiet. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. 12 minutes, I repeated. 12 minutes. And this paperwork is about the paternity process. Nothing else. "Nothing else today," Beckett said, which was honest. I'd give him that. He could have just said nothing else. I got in the car. I told myself it was the practical choice, the adult choice, the choice of a man who processed information efficiently and did not make decisions based on the fact that something about the way Barrett Hale looked at a broken planter box had made his ribcage feel briefly too small. The car was warm, quiet. It smelled like cedar and something faintly cold, like winter air through an open window. I went rigid. That was the scent from my vision. In the fragment in the parking lot yesterday, cedar and cold air. I had assumed it was context, environmental detail. I had not considered that it was a person. I sat between them in the back seat without having planned to, which was its own kind of betrayal by my own legs. and I kept my eyes forward and my hands wrapped around my cooling coffee cup and said nothing. Beckett was on his phone again, scrolling something. Efficient. Contained. Barrett was looking out the window. After 2 minutes of silence, he said without turning, "How long have you had it?" I did not insult either of us by pretending I didn't know what he meant. Since I was 19, it started small. Now it's less small. Does it hurt? Nobody had ever asked me that first. They always asked what I'd seen, or whether I'd predicted anything important, or whether I could teach them the lottery numbers. Sometimes, I said, when it's a big vision, feels like pressure behind the eyes, like a headache that knows something you don't. He nodded slowly like that made sense to him, like he was filing it somewhere careful. You knew about the planter, he said. I suspected, but you waited. I wanted to be sure. I paused, and I didn't want you to know yet. He turned from the window then, looked at me directly for the first time since we'd gotten in the car. Up close, his eyes were more complicated than amber. There were flecks of something darker in them, deep set and quiet. Why not? He asked. Because I don't know you, I said simply. Twunk and people who know what I can do have a habit of deciding what that means before I get the chance to. Something moved across his expression, slow and careful, not pity, closer to recognition. That's fair, he said quietly. The car pulled smoothly to a stop, 12 minutes exactly. I looked up at the Hale Group building, all glass and clean lines rising against the gray sky, and felt my stomach tighten in a way that had nothing to do with morning sickness. My precognition chose that exact moment to come back online with a single sharp flash. Barrett's voice, low and close, saying my name like it was something he'd been carrying for a while. Then darkness. I pressed my lips together. Great, I thought. Wonderful. Fantastic. I got out of the car anyway. The Hale Group lobby was exactly what I expected, and somehow still managed to be offensive about it. Marble floors the color of bone, ceilings so high they created their own weather system, a reception desk staffed by a woman with perfect posture, and the practiced smile of someone paid to be warm without being personal. She looked at Beckett and said, "Good morning, Mr. Hale," and then looked at Barrett and said, "Mr. Hale," and then looked at me and said absolutely nothing because I was a person-shaped question mark in a second-hand coat holding a coffee cup from a cafe down the street. "He's with us," Barrett said, without looking at her. I decided I liked that. I was not going to announce that I liked it. We took an elevator that moved like it was too sophisticated for the concept of speed, and I watched the numbers climb and thought about my vision. Barrett's voice saying my name, the darkness after. Precognition worked on significance, not on sequence. It didn't show me things chronologically. It showed me things that mattered. That was the part that was making my palms slightly damp. The elevator opened into a private floor, not an office exactly, more like a space that had been designed to feel like power in the architectural form. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Connecticut waterfront, a long conference table that had never in its life hosted anything as chaotic as what was about to happen at it. 2 sitting areas arranged around a central fireplace that was genuinely lit, which felt like a flex but also felt warm, so I moved slightly toward it without meaning to. "Sit wherever you're comfortable," Beckett said. I sat at the table because comfort was a trap and I knew better. Beckett set a folder in front of me, clean and white, with nothing on the cover. I opened it. Inside was a document I was not prepared for. Not legally, not emotionally, not in any dimension of my being. It was a timeline, organized, detailed, cross-referenced. Every administrative failure at Stanford Fertility and Reproductive Sciences laid out in clean chronological order. The data migration error, the dates the Hale donor profiles had been incorrectly reactivated, the window during which affected Omega patients would have had access to those profiles without knowing it. My procedure date was inside that window, by 11 days. I sat with that number for a moment, 11 days. If the clinic had caught the error 11 days earlier, I would be sitting in my apartment right now eating cereal in a spreadsheet, blissfully unaware that 2 billionaire twins existed. "How long have you known?" I asked. "We confirmed the error 4 months ago," Beckett said. He sat across from me, Barrett remained standing near the window, which I was beginning to understand was just his default position. We've been working with a private investigator to identify potentially affected patients. Potentially affected, I said. That's a very careful phrase. There were 3 Omega patients in that window. I looked up from the folder. You contacted the others? We attempted to. One had not proceeded with a successful procedure. One chose not to respond to our outreach. Beckett paused. You were the 3rd, and then yesterday morning you contacted us first. Accidentally, I thought about the ultrasound photo sitting on my thigh in the parking lot, my shaking hands. The wrong number. 7 years of precognition, and I had not seen a single second of this coming. That has to mean something, I said, mostly to myself. What does? Barrett asked from the window. That I found you by accident. My ability doesn't miss things this size. I closed the folder, pressed my palm flat against the cover. When something significant is coming, I see fragments. Enough to move, enough to prepare. But this? I got nothing. Not a flicker until after I'd already sent it. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Barrett said, maybe it wasn't an accident. I looked at him. He was watching me with that careful, unhurried attention. Not pushing. Just offering the thought and leaving it where I could decide what to do with it. That's a very metaphysical observation for a billionaire, I said. I read, he said simply. Beckett cleared his throat lightly. Back to business. I appreciated the consistency, even when it was slightly irritating. We'd like to arrange the paternity confirmation through your physician as agreed. We'll handle the cost and the logistics entirely on your terms. I already have an appointment with Dr. Finch next week, I said. We can work around that. Good. I pulled the folder closer and flipped back to the timeline. Something near the bottom had snagged my eye on the first read, and I had filed it away and was now pulling it back out. A footnote, small print at the bottom of the 3rd page, referencing a secondary document attached at the back. I turned to it. It was a legal brief. Short, dense, dated 8 weeks ago. I read the first paragraph, then I read it again. Beckett, my voice came out very flat. What is this? He didn't flinch, which told me he'd been waiting for me to reach it. A preliminary legal framework, drafted by our attorneys at the start of the inquiry. It outlines possible approaches to the situation depending on the outcome of paternity confirmation. This approach, I said, pointing to the second clause, suggests that in the event of confirmed paternity, the Omega carrying the child could be provided with a structured relocation package and a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for limited custodial rights. The fireplace crackled. Barrett had gone very still at the window. Hannah, that was drafted before we knew anything about you, Beckett said carefully. Before any contact was made, it was a legal precaution, not an intention. It has my name on it, I said. Page 2, paragraph 4, Elliot J. Voss, Greenwich, Connecticut. I looked up. You knew who I was before I texted you. The silence was different now, heavier. I closed the folder, picked up my coffee cup, set it back down because my hand was not entirely steady, and I refused to let either of them see that. How long, I said quietly. Have you known my name? Beckett met my eyes, steady and honest in a way that somehow made it worse. 6 weeks. 6 weeks. I had been 8 weeks pregnant for exactly 8 weeks, and they had known my name for 6 of them. They had not reached out. They had not warned me. And they had drafted a document offering me money in silence and called it a framework. I stood up. Elliot, Beckett said. I need a minute, I said. I am going to stand by this very expensive fireplace, and I am going to breathe, and I am not going to say anything I can't take back, because I was raised better than that. I walked to the fireplace, stood there. The heat pressed against my face, and I stared into it and breathed the way my therapist had taught me. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Repeat until you stop feeling like the floor has removed itself from under your feet. I heard footsteps, not Beckett's. Too quiet. Barrett stopped beside me, not close enough to crowd, just close enough to be present. He didn't say anything. He just stood there with me, watching the fire, his hands loose at his sides, And for reasons I was not ready to examine, that quiet company was the thing that kept me from walking straight back to the elevator. You didn't want to send that brief, I said. Not a question, a beat. No, but you didn't stop it. Another beat, longer. No. I turned to look at him. He was already looking at me. Up close in the firelight, he looked less like a billionaire and more like someone who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had gotten very good at not showing it. Why not? I asked. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, low and honest, because I didn't know you yet, and it's harder to protect someone you don't know from the people who are supposed to be on their side. The fire crackled between us. My precognition sent one single quiet pulse. Not a vision, not a fragment, just a feeling. Huma deep and certain, like a key turning in a lock I hadn't known existed. This one, it said. Pay attention to this one. I looked back at the fire. I'm not signing anything, I said. Not today. Not under these circumstances. I know, Barrett said, and I want a copy of everything in that folder sent to my personal email before I leave this building. Done? He said, and someone needs to explain to me why a legal document with my name in it existed for 6 weeks before anyone thought to pick up a phone. He nodded. That conversation needs to happen. You deserve it. I pressed my lips together, nodded once. My hand drifted without permission to my stomach, a small, reflexive gesture, the kind your body makes before your brain approves it. Barrett's eyes dropped to the movement and then came back up, said nothing. But something shifted in his expression, quiet and unguarded. There and then gone so fast I almost missed it. Almost. I filed that almost into a folder in my brain labeled Things to Think About When My Life Is Less on Fire, and turned back toward the table. Beckett was still sitting exactly where I had left him, hands folded, watching me with an expression that was doing a lot of careful work to appear neutral. I recognized that expression. I had worn it myself in every difficult conversation I had ever tried to control from the inside out. You want to say something? I said, sitting back down. Several things, he admitted. Pick the most important one. He was quiet for a moment. Actually quiet, not strategically quiet. The difference was subtle, but I had spent 7 years reading the silences before things happened, and I knew the texture of each kind. I want to tell you that the brief was my error in judgment, he said finally. Not our legal team's, not Barrett's. I authorized it because I was managing a situation before I understood it was a person. He paused. That was wrong, and I don't expect that admission to fix anything. I just needed you to know where it came from. I looked at him for a long moment. He did not look away. Here was the thing about Beckett Hale that I had not anticipated when I walked into that cafe this morning, holding my dignity and my coffee cup like armor. He was honest. Not in the soft, cushioned way people were honest when they wanted something from you. In the blunt, not slightly uncomfortable way of someone who had decided at some point that pretending was more expensive than truth. I respected that, even though it made everything more complicated. Okay, I said. He blinked. Okay? I heard you. I'm not forgiving you today because I just found out about it 20 minutes ago, and I have a policy against instant forgiveness. But I heard you. Something in his shoulders loosened, barely visible, but there. Barrett came back to the table and sat down, not across from me this time, but one seat to my left, which I noticed and said nothing about. There's something else, Barrett said. I looked at him. Of course there is. The clinic's closure was not entirely administrative. The room temperature did not actually change, but it felt like it did. Explain that sentence, I said. Barrett glanced at Beckett. A brief, loaded exchange of the kind that only happened between people who had been communicating in shorthand their entire lives. Then Beckett nodded slightly and Barrett turned back to me. The clinic had a silent partner, Barrett said. A private investment group that had been funding their expanded Omega reproductive program for 3 years. When we began our inquiry, we discovered that the data migration was not entirely accidental. I set my coffee cup down very carefully. Someone moved those files on purpose. Someone ensured that specific profiles were reactivated during the transfer, ours included. Why? That, Beckett said, is what we have been trying to determine for 4 months. I sat with that, let it move through me the way big information needed to move before I could think clearly about it. Someone had deliberately accessed the Hale donor profiles and made them available. Someone had engineered the circumstances that led to my procedure, which meant that the tiny person currently existing in my body was not the result of a medical error. He was the result of a plan. Mine was not a quiet reaction. I just kept it internal, which I thought was very mature of me. Who? I said. We have a suspect, Beckett said. We don't have proof yet. Who? I said again. Same tone, same word. Another glance between them. Our father, Barrett said. The fireplace crackled. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, a cloud moved across the gray sky, and the waterfront went briefly darker. Your father, I said. He arranged for me to unknowingly carry your children. As in, your actual human father. Our former father, Beckett said with a flatness that carried years of history in it. We've been estranged for 3 years. He's been attempting to force a succession issue. Barrett and I have no direct heirs. Under the terms of our grandfather's estate, if neither of us produces a biological heir before Barrett's 35th birthday, controlling interest in the Hale group reverts to a secondary branch of the family, our father's side. And Barrett's 35th birthday is when exactly? 4 months from now, Barrett said quietly. I looked at the ultrasound in my coat pocket. I could feel it there, even though I couldn't see it, the way you always knew where the heaviest thing you were carrying was. 8 weeks along, named 4 months until Barrett's birthday. A father who wanted the company badly enough to engineer a pregnancy without anyone's knowledge or consent. And me, sitting in the middle of all of it with precognition that had gone completely silent at the exact moment it should have been screaming. I need to ask you something, I said, and I need an honest answer. Yes, Beckett said. If the paternity test comes back confirmed, what do you actually want? Not what the lawyers drafted, not what your grandfather's estate requires. What do you want? The silence was long enough that I counted it. 7 seconds. Barrett spoke first. I want to know him, he said simply. Whatever that looks like, whatever pace you set, I just want the chance. I looked at Beckett. The same, he said. And then, it quieter. And I want to make sure you're protected from my father, from this situation, from anything that comes from a decision that was made without your knowledge or consent. He paused. You didn't ask for this. The least we can do is make sure you don't face it alone. My throat did something inconvenient. I looked down at the table. The thing about being strong and sassy and emotionally self-sufficient was that occasionally, in very specific circumstances, someone said exactly the right thing, and your whole carefully constructed composure developed a small crack right down the center. I breathed through it. I'm not alone anyway, I said, mostly to myself. I have a dying houseplant and a very strong opinions about oatmeal. I was managing. Barrett made that sound again. The suppressed laugh. Less suppressed this time. I looked at him sideways. You think that's funny? I think you're remarkable, he said, calm and straightforward, with no performance in it whatsoever. The crack in my composure got slightly wider. Stop that, I said. Stop what? Being sincere, it's disorienting. His mouth curved. Not the almost smile from the sidewalk. An actual one, slow and quiet, like it belonged only to this moment and wasn't available for general use. My precognition pulsed once. Warm, steady, like a heartbeat that had just decided to synchronize with mine. I looked away first. Okay, I said, pulling myself back together with both hands. Tell me everything you know about your father. If someone engineered my pregnancy without my consent, I want to understand exactly what I'm walking into. Beckett reached for a second folder. I leaned forward. And somewhere underneath the fear and the anger and the completely justified suspicion, something else was growing, small and stubborn and deeply inconvenient, the same way everything in my life that mattered had ever started, quietly, without permission, and absolutely refusing to stop. Beckett opened the second folder. It was thicker than the first, tabbed and organized with the kind of precision that told me someone had been building this case carefully over a long time with the specific intention of making it airtight before anyone outside this room ever saw it. I pulled it toward me and started reading. The man's name was Richard Hale, 63 years old. A former majority shareholder of the Hale Group before Beckett and Barrett's grandfather had restructured the estate 12 years ago and transferred controlling interest to the twins on the condition it remained in direct biological lineage. Richard had contested the restructuring twice in court and lost both times. He had been quietly accumulating influence in the secondary branch of the family ever since, positioning himself for the reversion clause like a chess player who had accepted he couldn't win the current game and decided to wait for the next one. The clinic connection was buried in the financial records, a shell company, 3 layers deep, that traced back to a holding group Richard Hale controlled through a proxy. The investment had begun 4 years ago. To patient data access had been arranged through a clinic administrator named Douglas Pratt, who had since disappeared to somewhere without extradition paperwork. I turned the page and stopped. Beckett. My voice came out strange, compressed. This acquisition record on page 7. Yes, this property. I pointed to the address without looking up. 1412 Aldermore Drive, Greenwich. A residential property Richard purchased 8 months ago through the same proxy structure. Beckett's voice was measured. We believe he's been using it as a base for the local portion of his operation. I looked up. That's my street, I said. Complete silence. That's 4 houses down from my apartment, I said. He bought a house 4 houses down from where I live 8 months ago. Neither of them spoke. And that was the moment the floor did actually remove itself. Not metaphorically this time. The room stayed still, and my body stayed still, but something inside me went into complete freefall because 8 months ago, I had been 3 months into my pregnancy journey. 8 months ago, I had just begun the screening process at Stanford Fertility. 8 months ago, Richard Hale had purchased a property on my street. He had not found me after the procedure. He had found me before it. He knew, I said, before the procedure. He already knew who I was. Beckett's jaw tightened. We believe he selected specific candidates, omegas who met particular criteria. What criteria? A pause that lasted 1 second too long. Beckett, my voice dropped. What criteria? Unaffiliated, no pack connection, no alpha bond. He held my gaze. So no one who would immediately have the resources or the social structure to complicate a legal claim. The words landed like something physical. He had chosen me because I was alone, because I had no pack, no bonded alpha, no safety net of biological connection that would make me harder to maneuver around. He had looked at the pool of available omega patients and picked the one least likely to push back effectively. Richard Hale had looked at my life and seen a gap he could use. My hands were flat on the table. I was aware of them with unusual clarity, the way you became aware of your own body when it was the only thing you could actually control in a given moment. How long have you known this part? I said quietly. Beckett's silence answered before he did. How long? I repeated. We confirmed the property connection 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. They had known for 2 weeks that a man connected to this situation owned a house on my street, that I had been specifically selected, that my solitude had been treated as a vulnerability and deliberately exploited, and they had said nothing. We were building the legal case, Beckett said. If we moved too quickly without sufficient evidence, he could disappear the same way Pratt did. We needed to be certain before we brought you into it. You were already in my life, when I said. I was already in it. I have been in it since before I knew any of you existed. I stood up. You were protecting your case. That's what you were doing. We were protecting you, Barrett said. I looked at him sharply. His expression was open in a way I had not seen from him before. Not the careful quiet of the morning. Something raw underneath it. Elliot, if we had told you 2 weeks ago, what would you have done? I would have done something, I said. Yes, he said. And he would have seen it. He's been watching. The property on your street isn't vacant. There's been rotating occupancy. We think he has someone in the neighborhood. The cold moved through me from the inside out. Someone on my street, watching my building, watching me walk to my car in the morning and carry groceries up my stairs and live my small, unguarded life, completely unaware that I was a piece in someone else's game. I need some air, I said. Elliot, Beckett said. I am not leaving, I said sharply. I said I need air, not that I'm done. There is a significant difference, and I need you to understand that right now. I walked to the window. The Connecticut waterfront stretched out below, gray and cold and indifferent. Boats in the marina, traffic on the bridge. The ordinary machinery of a Tuesday moving forward without any awareness of what was happening on the 42nd floor. I pressed one hand against the glass. My precognition came in hard and fast, and without any of its usual warning. Not a fragment this time. A full vision, vivid and cold. My apartment building, the front entrance. Night, not day. A figure I didn't recognize standing under the overhang, face obscured, holding something I couldn't identify. And then my own front door, open from the inside, spilling light into the dark hallway. I had not opened it. The vision released me. I turned around. So both of them were watching me. They had seen the change in my face. Beckett was already half out of his chair. There's someone in my building, when I said. Tonight. I don't know what time, but they get inside. The shift in the room was instant. Beckett had his phone out before I finished the sentence. Barrett crossed to me in 4 strides, not grabbing, not crowding, just placing himself between me and the window, like that was the obvious thing to do. Are your visions accurate? Beckett said into the phone. And I realized he was not asking me. He was describing the situation to someone on the other end. They've never been wrong, I said. The timing is flexible, but the event isn't. Then you're not going back there tonight, Barrett said. I looked up at him. You don't get to make that decision. No, he agreed. But I'm asking you not to, because whoever my father has watching you has been there for weeks, and we have been building a case that is very close to complete, and if something happens to you before we can move, I will not recover from that. He said it plainly, not dramatically, not as manipulation, just as a fact, quiet and undecorated. So I'm asking. The window was cold at my back. His eyes were steady in front of me. My precognition was silent in a way that felt less like absence and more like held breath. I have a dying houseplant, I said. Someone needs to water it. I'll send someone, Beckett said without looking up from his phone. That's not actually the point I was making. I know, Barrett said, but you'll stay. I looked at him for a long moment. The crack in my composure from Act 6 had not closed. It had gotten quietly wider over the course of this conversation, and standing here with his eyes this steady and this close, and Richard Hale's property 4 houses down from everything I owned in the world, I felt the specific exhaustion of someone who had been holding everything alone for a very long time and had just been offered for the first time something that looked like a hand extended in the dark. I hated how much I wanted to take it. If I stay, I said carefully, it's because of the vision, not because you asked. Understood, Barrett said. He stepped back, gave me space, but the warmth of where he had been standing stayed in the air between us for a moment longer than it should have. Beckett lowered his phone. Security is already moving to your building. We'll have a clearer picture within the hour. I nodded, sat back down at the table, looked at the second folder, turned to the next page, and found something that stopped every coherent thought I had dead in its tracks. A photograph, surveillance quality, slightly grainy, taken from a distance, showing 2 people outside a coffee shop I recognized immediately because I had been inside it approximately 18 hours ago. The coffee shop was Grounds & Co. The 2 people in the photograph were Beckett and Barrett. The timestamp in the corner read 6 days ago. Richard Hale had known they were coming to Greenwich. He had known before the wrong number, before the text, before any of it, which meant one devastating, stomach-dropping thing. My sending that ultrasound to the wrong number had not been an accident born of shaking hands and emotional overwhelm. I knew someone had changed the contact in my phone. I sat with that sentence for 10 full seconds, turned it over, looked at every side of it, tried to find an angle where it meant something less catastrophic than what it obviously meant. There wasn't one. Beckett, I slid the folder across the table and pointed to the photograph without touching it. Look at the timestamp. He looked. His expression did not change dramatically. It did something quieter and more dangerous. It went very still in the way that expensive, controlled things went still right before they became extremely expensive and extremely uncontrolled. Barrett leaned over from my left, looked at the photo, looked at the timestamp, looked at me. Your phone, he said. Someone accessed my phone, I said. Change the contact. I'd made sure that when I went to send that image to myself, it went to you instead. I paused. Which means whoever is watching my building has been closer than the street. The word closer sat in the room like a drop temperature. Beckett was already on his phone again. This time he was not speaking quietly. He used the voice I imagined ran board meetings and ended careers, low and precise and carrying the specific energy of someone who had just decided that patience was no longer the strategy. I turned my own phone over in my hands. I knew every contact in here. I had organized them personally, alphabetically, with the mild obsessive energy of a man who liked his data clean. I scrolled to the S section, found the entry labeled Self, which was what I called my own number when I needed to send files to my email quickly. The number attached to it was not mine. It was the number I had called Beckett from yesterday. I stared at it. My hands were steady. I found that interesting. Every other moment of crisis in my adult life had come with physical evidence, trembling or nausea, or the behind-the-eyes pressure of a vision forcing its way through. Right now, my hands were completely still, and my vision was clear, and I felt something I could only describe as the specific cold calm of a person who had just run out of room to be surprised. When did they have access to your phone? Barrett said. Not accusatory, just working through it the same way I was. I don't know. I kept scrolling, checking. I leave it on the kitchen counter when I sleep. My building has a key fob entry, but the inner hallway locks are standard. A decent pick would take 30 seconds. We're pulling the building's entry logs now, Beckett said, phone still at his ear. My building doesn't have cameras in the hallway, I said. I know because I asked when I moved in, and the answer was a very cheerful no and a pamphlet about community trust. Barrett sat down fully now, turning his chair slightly toward me. Close enough that I could smell the cedar and cold air of him. That scent my vision had handed me in a parking lot 24 hours ago, like a piece of a puzzle I hadn't known I was assembling. Are you all right? He asked. I am operating, I said. Those are different things, but right now operating is what's available. He nodded, accepted that without pushing on it. I want to understand something, I said. I set my phone face down on the table. For your father went to significant effort to engineer a situation where I would be carrying your biological children. He selected me because I had no pack protection. He put someone on my street. He accessed my phone. I looked at Barrett directly. What does he gain if I make contact with you? What is the play? Barrett was quiet for a moment, thinking, not stalling. Control of the narrative, he said finally. If he engineered the contact, he controls the context. He knows what you know, and when you know it. He knows whether Beckett and I are aware of the full picture. He can adjust. A pause. And if the paternity is confirmed and a relationship forms between us before he's ready to move legally, he could use the circumstances of how it happened to challenge the legitimacy of any arrangement we make. He could argue the pregnancy was the result of fraud, Beckett said, lowering his phone, and use that to insert himself into any custody or estate proceedings as an injured party seeking to protect the family's interests. He would use my baby, I said flatly, as a legal crowbar. Yes, Beckett said. I breathed in through my nose, out through my mouth, counted nothing because I was past counting. Here is what I want you both to understand, I said. I have spent the last 24 hours having my entire understanding of my own life rewritten. I found out I'm carrying children who may biologically belong to two men I had never met. I found out the clinic I trusted committed what amounts to reproductive fraud. And I found out someone has been watching me from 4 houses away. I found out my phone was accessed without my knowledge. I paused. And I found out that the two of you knew pieces of this for weeks and made a calculated decision about what I could handle and when. Neither of them spoke. I understand the reasoning, I said. I don't like it. Those are two different things, and I need you to understand I'm holding both of them at the same time. I looked at Beckett. You protected your case, I get it. But I was not a variable in your case. I was a person living 4 houses from someone dangerous without knowing it, and that distinction matters to me enormously. Beckett held my gaze. You're right, he said. No qualification. Kuna, you're right, and I made the wrong call, and I will spend whatever time you require making that clear through action rather than words. I looked at him for a long moment. He did not look away, did not soften it or package it more palatably. Just handed it to me straight and waited. I turned to Barrett. He was already watching me. I argued for telling you sooner, he said quietly. I want you to know that. I'm not saying it to separate myself from the decision because I still let it happen. But I want you to know. Something loosened in my chest, minimally. Enough. Okay, I said. I picked my phone back up, went to my contacts, deleted the altered entry, recreated it correctly with my own number. Small action, but it was something I could fix right now with my own hands, and I needed that. Then I opened a new contact. I typed in Beckett's number, labeled it Beckett Hale, because I was not giving him a nickname yet and possibly ever. Opened another, Barrett's number. Labeled it Barrett Hale. I set the phone down. I'm not going back to my apartment tonight, I said. Not because either of you told me not to, because my precognition showed me something gets inside, and I am 26 weeks pregnant, and the only person who has ever made decisions about this baby's safety is me, and I am deciding this one. 8 weeks. Barrett said gently. I stared at him. You said 26, he said. You're 8 weeks. I pressed my fingers to my eyes. I am aware of how pregnant I am. It was a grammatical casualty of stress, thank you. His mouth did the thing again. The slow, quiet curve that felt like it belonged only to specific moments. Don't smile at my stress, I said. I'm not smiling at your stress, he said. I'm smiling at you. The distinction landed somewhere it had no business landing. I removed my fingers from my eyes and looked at the ceiling briefly, which was a very good ceiling, very high, very neutral, blessedly uninvested in my emotional situation. Where am I staying, I said. And please tell me it's not here, because I cannot emotionally live inside a building that looks like this. We have a residential property in Old Greenwich, Beckett said, separate from our primary residence. Private. Full security already on the perimeter. You'd have your own space entirely. How many bedrooms? 6. I need 1. The baby needs none yet. We're very low maintenance. Barrett stood, held out his hand for my coat, which was draped over the chair behind me. I looked at the hand, looked at the coat, looked at him. I can put on my own coat, I said. I know, he said. He did not move his hand. I held the look for 3 more seconds, which I considered a respectable resistance. And then I stood and let him hold the coat while I put it on. His hand settled it across my shoulders briefly, warm and certain, before dropping away. My precognition sent one quiet pulse, not a vision, just warmth, spreading from the point of contact outward. The way heat moved through something cold that had forgotten it was capable of being warm. I picked up the ultrasound photo from the table where it had been sitting through all of it, small and grainy and stubborn. Okay, baby, I said softly, looking at it. Change of address. And thus, temporarily, Beckett was already moving toward the elevator. Barrett waited for me to step forward first. I did. And as I walked toward the elevator with the ultrasound in my hand and the cedar scent of Barrett Hale at my back, and the entire architecture of my former understanding of my own life in carefully managed ruins around me, my precognition finally, fully, came back online. The vision was longer than any I had ever had. A kitchen, bright and warm, the sound of something cooking. 2 voices somewhere down a hallway, low and laughing. My own hands, relaxed and unhurried, wrapped around a coffee cup. And then a small sound. New and indescribable, and every single person in that vision turning toward it at once. I blinked. The elevator doors opened. You saw something, Barrett said, quiet, certain. Yes, I said. You're good or bad? I stepped into the elevator, thought about the warmth of that kitchen, the laughing voices, the small, new, indescribable sound. I genuinely don't know yet, I said honestly. The doors closed, and for the first time since yesterday morning, sitting in a clinic in a paper gown holding photographic evidence of my detonated life plan, I felt something that was not panic or fury or cold strategic calm. Something small, stubborn, refusing to ask permission. The same way I was beginning to understand, everything that mattered always started. The old Greenwich property was not a house. It was the architectural equivalent of someone deciding that the word home was not ambitious enough and building an argument against it. Warm stone exterior, a front porch with actual rocking chairs, one which I had not expected from billionaires, and which softened my entire defensive posture by approximately 40% before I even got through the door. Inside, it smelled like wood and clean linen, and something faintly like the cedar I had been carrying in my lungs since the back of that car. I stood in the entryway and looked around and said, "This is aggressively cozy for two people who own half of Greenwich." "Barrett picked it," Beckett said, setting his keys down on the entry table. I looked at Barrett. He lifted one shoulder. "I like houses that feel like someone actually lives in them. Do you actually live here?" "We do now," he said simply. I decided not to examine what that meant and followed Beckett down a hallway to a room that had a window seat overlooking a back garden. A bed with more pillows than any single person required, and a bathroom that made my apartment's bathroom look like a philosophical suggestion. "There's food in the kitchen," Beckett said from the doorway. "Help yourself to anything. Security is on the perimeter. You won't see them, but they're there." "Okay." "And Elliot," he paused, "I'm sorry for all of it. The brief, the timeline, the decisions I made about what you could handle." He said it the same way he'd said everything else today, clean and undecorated. "You deserved better from the first moment we knew your name." I looked at him standing in the doorway of this room he had not picked, in this house he had not chosen, holding himself accountable in the quiet and specific way of someone who understood that apologies without changed behavior were just noise. "I know," I said, "and I'm going to keep being annoyed about it for a while, but I heard you." The corner of his mouth moved. "Fair." He left me to it. I sat on the window seat, looked out at the garden. The November light was going thin and gold at the edges, the way it did in late afternoon when the day had decided it was finished up making its point. I pulled the ultrasound photo from my coat pocket and held it in both hands. 8 weeks, a strong heartbeat. A father who had engineered every circumstance of his existence, and 2 men who had just turned their entire controlled lives sideways to make sure he was safe. I pressed my thumb gently to the edge of the photograph. "Eventful first trimester," I told him. "It gets better. Probably." My precognition stayed quiet, not the anxious silence of something withheld, but the settled quiet of something that had already shown me what I needed and was now waiting for me to catch up. I thought about the vision, the warm kitchen, the laughing voices, my own hands unhurried around a coffee cup, the small new sound. I let myself want it. That was the thing I had not let myself do yet. Through all of it, the wanting. Because wanting something that was also terrifying and uncertain and completely outside the plan felt like weakness. And I had spent 7 years being the most competent person in my own life because there was no one else available for the job. But I was tired of being competent at being alone. I set the photo down on the window seat beside me, got up, and went to find the kitchen. It was at the back of the house. I'd open and warm with pendant lights over a wide island and a window above the sink that looked out at the same garden I had just been watching from the other direction. Barrett was already in it, standing at the stove with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled to the elbow, doing something with a pan that smelled like garlic and made my stomach register an opinion for the first time all day. He looked up when I came in, did not look surprised. "You cook," I said. "I cook," he confirmed. "You're a billionaire who cooks." "I'm a person who got tired of a restaurant," he said. "Sit down. You haven't eaten since that coffee this morning." I sat at the island. You noticed that? I noticed most things about you, he said, returning his attention to the stove. Occupational hazard of paying attention. That's going to be a problem, I said. Why? Because I'm not used to it, and it keeps making me feel things I haven't budgeted for. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, without turning, "What kind of things?" I looked at the back of his head, the set of his shoulders, the easy, unhurried way he moved in a kitchen like he belonged in it. The inconvenient kind, I said. He turned then, looked at me across the island with those complicated amber eyes, firelight warm in the kitchen glow. "Tell me something true," he said quietly. I blinked. "What?" "Something true. About you. Not the situation. Not the pregnancy. Not the logistics." He set down the spatula. "Something true about Elliot Voss that has nothing to do with any of this." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, I've been alone for 3 years, not accidentally. I made myself alone because the last time I let someone close enough to matter, I saw the end of it coming 6 weeks before it happened, and I stayed anyway, because I thought maybe I was wrong. I paused. I wasn't wrong, and I decided after that I would rather be the person who saw things coming than the person who let them hit. The kitchen was quiet except for something softly simmering. "And now?" Barrett asked. "Now I'm sitting in your kitchen at the end of the most disastrous 24 hours of my adult life, and my precognition showed me a vision of somewhere warm, with laughing voices and a sound I've never heard before, and I knew immediately it was something I wanted." I looked at him straight. "I don't know what that means yet, but I'm not pretending I didn't see it." Barrett moved around the island slowly, not rushing, not performing, just closing the distance between us the way he did everything, with the patient certainty of someone who had already decided and was simply waiting for the moment to arrive. He stopped in front of me, close enough that the cedar scent of him was a full presence, warm and specific, the exact scent my precognition had handed me in that parking lot, like the first word of a sentence it knew I needed to hear. "I've been watching a file with your name on it for 6 weeks, he said quietly, "and every single piece of information I found made me more certain that whoever you were, you deserved better than what was happening to you." He paused. And then you walked into a cafe with your coffee and your scarf and your complete refusal to be managed by anyone, and I thought, there he is. My throat did the inconvenient thing again. "There I am," I repeated softly. "There you are," he said. He lifted one hand, slow and deliberate, gave me every opportunity in the world to move back. His fingers touched my jaw, light and careful, like something he intended to keep. I did not move back. The kiss was quiet. That was the thing I remembered most about it afterward. Not its urgency, but its quiet. The way it asked rather than assumed. The way it felt like a period at the end of a very long sentence rather than an exclamation mark. His thumb traced the line of my cheekbone once, gentle and unhurried. And I felt the entire defended architecture of 3 careful years develop a crack so clean and complete that I understood immediately it was not going to close. I let it stay open. When we pulled back, the kitchen smelled like garlic and cedar, and something new that didn't have a name yet but felt like it was in the process of getting one. That was either very brave or very stupid, I said. "Probably both," he agreed. Beckett appeared in the kitchen doorway. He looked at Barrett, looked at me, looked at the very specific distance, or lack of it, between us. "Something burning?" I asked, because someone had to say something, and Barrett was busy looking at me like I was a decision he'd already made. "No," Beckett said. He moved to the stove and picked up the spatula with the practiced ease of a man who had learned to adapt quickly. Something shifted in his expression as he turned back to the pan, softer than his usual precision, unguarded at the edges. He glanced back at me once. "Plates are in the cabinet above the sink," he said quietly, "if you want to stay for dinner." I looked at Barrett. He was still watching me with that quiet, unhurried certainty. I thought about my apartment 4 houses from a man who had tried to reduce my life to a legal variable. I thought about my dying houseplant and my 2 in the morning spreadsheets in the 3 years I had spent being the only person responsible for keeping myself safe. I thought about the vision, Warm kitchen, laughing voices. My hands relaxed around a coffee cup. The small, new, indescribable sound. I got up, found the cabinet above the sink, got down 3 plates. For the record, I said, setting them on the island, I'm still annoyed about the brief. Noted, Beckett said, and I reserve the right to be difficult on a rotating basis. We'd expect nothing less, Barrett said, and someone is going to need to deal with my houseplant situation because I have developed an emotional attachment to that plant that is disproportionate to its current life expectancy. I'll have it brought over tomorrow, Beckett said, along with my things. Along with your things? I sat back down at the island. Outside the kitchen window, the last of the November light had gone gold and soft, settling over the back garden like something that had decided to stay. My precognition was quiet in the way of something fulfilled. My heart was doing something new and slightly terrifying, and entirely without my permission. And in my coat pocket, the ultrasound photo sat small and certain and stubbornly present, carrying a heartbeat that had somehow managed to find exactly the people it was always going to find. Not by accident, not by wrong number, by something older and more determined than either. I picked up a fork. Okay, I said softly, to no one and everyone. Let's figure this out. And for the first time in 3 years, I meant it for more than just myself.